Today, we're going to talk about how to set yourself up to spend or how to make it a little easier to set yourself up to spend in retirement. So let's just start with here's my snapshot of where I'm at in Right Capital as of today. So, in general, let me talk about the general approach to all this. So, what I'm trying to do when I retired, about 3 months before I retired, I actually sat down and said, okay, how do I set up all my accounts? How do I set things up so that it's easier for me to spend so I don't have to worry about it? Because for me, spending is, and for our entire marriage, spending has never been the easy thing for me to do. That's one of the reasons we set up a budget in our early years wasn't to restrict our spending as much as it was for me to open up the ability to spend and feel comfortable. So I knew going into retirement I was going to face some of those same issues. So instead of me trying to show it to you actually with the accounts and stuff, I thought I would kind of set it up and show you in this chart, like kind of how I did it. Don't let the chart intimidate you. It's actually a lot simpler than it looks, but it was an easy way for me to kind of communicate what the plan is today and what the plan is going to be tomorrow. So if you look here at the top, here's our different categories of expenses. Here's my pre-tax accounts, because that's going to play, it doesn't play as much part now, but it will then. Here's my online bank accounts. Here's my local bank accounts. And here's income streams, present and future. Okay, so let's talk about my expenses, because that's kind of how a lot of this works. Is different kinds of expenses. I need to do different things to make it easier to spend. So we have like in and out expenses, property taxes, insurance. Those are things where I'm going to essentially expect them to zero out at the end of the year. They're in Right Capital to say I'm going to spend this much per year on it, and I'm going to put that much in, and if everything works right, it'll be zero by the end of the year. I'm just expecting that. Then I have accumulation stuff. This is stuff where I have budgets to put money in, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'll spend it, like emergency house stuff, appliance stuff. Vacation is almost an in and out. I may actually move vacation to in and out because I tend to spend it. But gifts, car repairs, these are accounts where, hey, I may put $5,000 in that account, for emergency house stuff, but I may not have any house emergency stuff. So what'll happen is that account could either after a couple of years I stop funding it or whatnot. But it's stuff I don't necessarily have to spend down. It won't end at zero at the end of the year. And then finally, there's just day-to-day spending stuff. These are typically monthly bills. So you could even say accumulation stuff. It's like surprise bills. Day-to-day spending is expected bills, that happen every month. In and out stuff tends to be stuff that happens every 6 months or once a year, like homeowners insurance, things like that. So that's an easy way to look. Okay, so this blue category, that's basically who are we paying? So you have the insurance company, the town when I'm paying property taxes, vacation, that's the hotel and stuff like that. And then most of what we do, probably 95% of what we do, we put on a credit card. So what I'm doing for a lot of my day-to-day spending is I'm using the credit card for the day-to-day spending. Everybody on this channel is probably pretty wise financially. So, obviously you don't use a credit card if you can't control yourself. Okay, so here's some of my pre-tax accounts. Now, in general, these pre-tax accounts, I'm really not using them now, which you'll see in a minute why. I will be using them, and I have them in here as a strategy. So I have my IRA, my Roth IRA, and then my wife's IRA. And the balances on those are, I've done other videos on those. So, and then let's look at the online bank accounts. So I have an online checking. Now, let's talk about the different accounts and setting up accounts with online banking, meaning an actual online bank. In this case, I use my credit card bank because I watch the credit card. So it was just easier to set up my online banking with the same credit card and create accounts. So I have a checking account. That tends to be for in and out stuff, things like that. Um, uh, the in and out stuff, I have a separate account for that. So kind of what you're going to see is I have an account for each one of these different kind of bills. I have an account for accumulation stuff, and setting up these accounts literally takes 3 minutes. It's just not a big deal. Okay, so these are going to be the accounts that I keep track of, like checking in and out and accumulation stuff. Now, I also have a local bank account, which I'll cover here too. We have a local bank account, which is the account we've had for like 30 years or whatever, where Beth's paycheck gets put into that. My paycheck used to get put into that. And we tend to use that for paying the credit card. It just worked out well because in the end, most of Beth's paycheck, even now after I quit, covers the day-to-day spending, and then I cover all the rest of the stuff. Uh, but we have a checking. So we have a checking account. We tend to use it for simple stuff, right? And then I have in this online bank account. The other reason we went so fast with online bank accounts because they offered so much better interest like 2 years ago when interest rates went up. So I have CDs in there. I have an account called the summer shortfall account. What that's all about is my wife is a teacher, so she doesn't get paid in the summer. So I set up an account for that. Now, oh well, here we'll keep going. Then I have a main account, which is kind of just the it's the big account where I put money in that isn't necessarily been put into all these other accounts yet. An example of that is before I retired. This is going to be essentially my main cash store, if you want to think of it that way. It makes like 3.5%, something like that, and any extra money I have that I'm not spending this year, in other words, this could be money I'm going to spend next year. This is where I'm going to put my healthcare money. Where when I start taking out to prep me in a few years for healthcare to keep my income low, I'm going to put the money in there. I'll probably end up sticking in CDs and stuff, but generally, this main account is meant to just hold large pieces of cash, which is what I do. What I do with my bonus. So I had 2, 3 bonuses, before I retired, and so I would shove that into my main account into some CDs and get it ready. And then I have another account that I'm going to set up for Roth. And then I have some Roth stuff. When I just start doing Roth conversions, I'm going to put it into the money into this account. Okay, so what's the point of these accounts, right? So the point of these accounts is I didn't want in our day-to-day lives us just going off of checking and having some random haphazard way of funding checking because it kind of stresses me out. I don't feel like I don't know, it just stresses me out. I feel like I don't have control. I don't know what's going on. I didn't want to maintain some big spreadsheet somewhere. So it was easier to break out the accounts. Not only that, it became pretty easy, right? Because then I don't have to think about spending. Hey, if we run out, whatever. If the account runs out, then so be it. We run out and we know. If I run out in the accumulation stuff, then I know we've overspent that year. And I'll just have to work through it. And also, I didn't want to have to worry about constantly funding these accounts on a monthly basis. So that's what all these arrows are for. Okay. The blue arrows are things I only do once a year. The black arrows are things that happen more than once a year. And the red arrows are they're income arrows. Actually, this black arrow should have been income. And the dashes mean anything that has a dash means it hasn't happened yet. So like Beth hasn't collected her Social Security, so that has little dashes around it. Beth hasn't gotten her pension yet, so it has dashes, and I haven't collected my Social Security. And these red arrows, they're not happening yet because I haven't had to worry about it because Beth hasn't fully retired yet. So let's talk about what I do. So what I do is at the beginning of the year, based on Right Capital, because I know what I put in for budgets, and that's all these blue arrows are, I just move money into the right accounts. So at the beginning in January, I'll take money from Maine, and based on what my budget is, I'll move that money into the accumulation stuff, and I'll move that money into the in and out stuff, and I'll move the right amount of money into my summer shortfall. Now, what I'll start doing is when I have I have quite a bit in Maine. I think I have like I have like 180,000 in Maine, something like that now, because I had been funding that before I retired because I knew I wanted to build up my cash position. So, but when that goes down and I get to the point, say, when I'm 65 or whatever, something like that. I mean, I'm going to have to fund this before 65, which I'll do with some Roth conversions, or either just some distributions, or I'll set it up in Roth. I haven't decided yet. So what I'm going to do when we get there is what I'll do is once a year, I'll go into my IRA and I'll do a big distribution, and I know that, well, we could be missing out on some returns for that year. Yeah, but that's just part of, that's part of what I'm setting up. I don't want to try and manage my 401k at that level where every month I'm having to move amounts in and stuff. So probably what I'm going to do, and this may change, I'm sure I'll let you know when the video happens, but my plan now is is when this Maine is gone, which will be a couple years. I mean, it's going to be more than that because for healthcare, I'm going to be putting some more money in it next year from my IRA. But the plan is once a year to take whatever money I need for that year, stick it into Maine, and then distribute it into the right buckets for that year. And that way, I don't really have to think. So when a car repair comes up, I don't have to think about how it's impacting my whole, plan or where the money's coming from. I can come right to these accounts. Now, what I do so that I can keep track of it, what I do is when instead of I could just pay most of the stuff is from the credit card. So I could just pay the credit card right from here. But the problem is when you pay a credit card, when you pay the credit card, because they're all the same, whatever, they're all the same vendor, um, it doesn't give you a note. So I like being able to keep track of it. So the way I can keep track of it and check it out at the end of the year is whenever I have to pay something from one of these accumulations buckets, whether it's summer shortfall, or accumulation stuff, or in and out stuff, I'll transfer it and it takes 2 seconds. I'll go into that account on my online account and I'll transfer it from the right account into checking because when you transfer, you can put a note. So what I'll do is I'll move that into checking, and then I'll pay the credit card from the checking. And like I said, all this is online. There's no writing anything because it's all the checking. All the online bank account is the same vendor as the credit card. So that way, as I'm moving stuff in at the end of the year, if I just want to do a quick check and see stuff, I'll have notes. So when I see, oh, what was that $300 bill from In and Out stuff? If I had paid the credit card directly, I wouldn't know. But because of this, I can look and say, oh, that was my annual homeowner's insurance or something like that. It just helps me keep track of it. So let's go down here a little bit. So our day-to-day spending. Now, right now it works out pretty well because Beth's paycheck gets deposited in our local bank account, and we just basically write a check out for credit card, and then there's a few bills we have that they won't take a credit card because of the credit card fee. So it comes out of there. But generally, it's pretty close, except for this summer shortfall. And what I do for the summer shortfall is I'll transfer that summer shortfall out like once a month for 2 months, whatever it is, July and August. I'll transfer that into the local bank so that when we're when we're paying the credit card bill, um, we can continue to do it from the local bank account because I'm big on consistency. I don't like to do things out of the flow because then when I have to track stuff down, it's a pain because I don't know what I did. I like consistent patterns. So, which is important, right? Because if you want to start keeping track of stuff, you have to have a consistent pattern. So right now, Beth's paycheck pretty much goes in the first and the 15th goes in that. And generally, except for the summer shortfall, it's enough to pay the credit card bill. So what I'll do is she feeds that in. And so this is part of our transition too. So what's going to happen, and you see this from the little dotted red lines, is when Beth retires and goes to work, it's almost even. So in other words, the amount of these three income or these two income streams comes relatively close to replacing this income stream. Now there's healthcare that isn't, I'm going to have to pay for the healthcare. But so the whole idea essentially is when she decides to retire in a couple years, that this will go away. But then, and that also has to play into why she can retire and collect a pension at 62. So that's also when we're going to collect Social Security. So and she's the lesser of our two Social Security, so we'll take hers first. So what happens is essentially these two I'm going to direct when we collect on them to go into our local bank account. So this becomes relatively not impacted. We get to keep basically the same flow. I have a feeling I'll have to, probably move a little bit of extra money in there every month, but I'll just schedule it. That's the other thing too. Like anything, when I get to the point where I have to do scheduling, like let's say, probably when Beth retires, because that's when we start really spending more money. Probably what I'm going to do is I'll move what I need for the whole year from my IRA into my main account. But then probably what I'll do is I'll do a once a month schedule from main into checking, because I can very easily keep track of things on a month to month basis. Like this is kind of my litmus test right here. Do we have enough? How's checking doing? It's been great because we don't spend as much as in the budget. It just kind of works out that way. And so we tend to have extra coming into the summer. So I tend not to need what I budgeted for summer shortfall because it's been accumulated in checking. But checking is just really easy to watch, right? Because I'm writing bills, I'm paying bills out of checking. So this is a nice place. So I'll continue to let that happen. So I don't want to put a huge amount in. Like I don't want to fund that in the beginning of the year because it'll have too much and I won't have a good idea. But what I'll do is I'll set up an automated transfer in the amount of whatever we want from this main into day to day. That's when I retire, or when she retires. Sorry, I'm already retired. So just to be thorough, this I put when I got my bonus salary, I put it into CDs in my online bank account, and I put it into my main account so I could draw from. So that kind of sums the whole thing up. I just take a look and look at the labels. Like I know it looks complex, but the great thing it's not complex. Like all these blue lines, they only happen once a year. So it's not a big deal. So, but what this does is it enables me, if you tried to do all this from just one account, it would be impossible to keep track of in your head. So by having these multiple accounts, it enables me to spend. It makes it easier for me to not worry about the spending and to see it when things are going wrong. Like if I see this going down too much, I'll know we may have an issue. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was of some value, and I will see you next time.